Hello everyone, and welcome to Capitol Watch for January 20th, our weekly look at legislative issues in Jefferson City. And joining us from our Governmental Relations Office in Jefferson City is MSBA's Associate Executive Director for Advocacy and our Chief Lobbyist, Mike Reed. And Mike, a lot of activity this week in Jefferson City, not the least of which was the Governor's State of the State address, and we also learned about his budget recommendations. And overall, we'd have to say pretty good news for public schools, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was good news for public schools. As good as news as we could get in light of the budget situation that we have in the state of Missouri. And yes, once again, was a very, very busy week. But now with the governor putting out his budget address, we know what the framework is to move forward and his idea of education.
And the governor did propose a $5 million increase in the foundation formula, Mike, and flat funding for other programs such as transportation. So, I mean, that's not a huge increase for our public schools, but at least it's not a cut, is it?
No, it's not a cut. And in light of the fact that there may be as much as a $500 million hole in the budget, the ability to keep us flat and even have a $5 million increase is a good sign. Would we, if everything was perfect in the world, would we love to have full funding for everything? Certainly. Is that a possibility? Not at all. So we're very, very happy with where we're going. To say that we're happy with keeping flat, at least we're not going backwards. And that's the most important thing, is that, that education is a top priority, and we will get as much money as we possibly can, and that's what we need.
Well, what's the outlook now in the legislature, Mike? Of course, the governor is simply making recommendations. The legislature will act on the budget. Is there support, do you think, for the governor's recommendation in the House and Senate?
I think there is support. The legislature, House and Senate, have to make some very tough calls, and they're going to have to make some cuts in some areas. But I believe that there is support. I've talked to the Senate Education, or the Senate Chair of the budget, and he is very supportive of K-12 education as well as higher education, and he will do everything possible to get us as much as we possibly can.
One of the other issues the governor addressed in his speech, Mike, was charter schools, and actually calling for greater accountability for charter schools that we have in St. Louis and Kansas City. At least that's where they are at the moment. Let's take a look at some remarks from the governor's speech on charter schools.
Now, Missouri has some strong charter schools where inspired teachers with fresh ideas are giving children a top-notch education. But let's be frank. We also have charter schools where children are languishing in the classrooms that aren't up to par academically, in schools that aren't well managed. And our students pay the price. I call on the legislature to send to my desk a comprehensive charter accountability bill that holds all charter schools and their sponsors to high standards of academic achievement and financial integrity this year.
And Mike, that's something that we would certainly endorse, isn't it? Greater accountability for charter schools.
It is, and it's something we worked on very hard last year, is greater accountability for charter schools. Charter schools wanted to expand outside their present places where they are, which is Kansas City and St. Louis. If you have expansion, you must have accountability, because just going free willy, as they say, is not acceptable. There are some good charter schools, but there have been a number of charter schools who have not lived up to their promise, and they're not held accountable in any way, shape, or form. And that accountability must be required of those schools, and it's up to us as people in education to make sure that that accountability is there, because it's not fair to the students.
I guess one of the questions, though, Mike, is can we have a bill that deals solely with accountability for charter schools, or is that issue going to get mixed up with some other issues?
Probably mixed up with other issues. If we get accountability, the charter school people want expansion. You know, we are trying to separate the two as they should be separated. You should have accountability before you have expansion. Not sure that's going to happen, but that's one of the fights we're going to have.
We had some hearings this week, Mike, in both the House and Senate on proposals to change the foundation formula. Tell us about that.
Yes, both the House and the Senate on Wednesday had hearings on bills dealing with the foundation formula. One by Senator Pierce. These bills deal with the proration factor when, in fact, the foundation formula is not fully funded. What is the proration factor, and how is that treated? How much less are various schools getting? And there's a different proration factor between hold harmless and non-hold harmless schools. The most important part is the discussion is out there, that people who are hold harmless and non-hold harmless can come together and see what is best for students, and put the whole question on the table. Because once again, the foundation formula, even though we get an extra $5 million, will not be fully funded this year. So let's figure out what to do and what to do in the future.
Another issue that came up this month, or this week, Mike, in a hearing was the proposal to require schools to deal with the immigration status of students. Tell us about that hearing.
That's right. That bill was heard in the Senate General Laws Committee, and our president, Vic Lenz, came down and testified against that piece of legislation. The bill would require that schools check the birth certificate and determine whether or not students are here legally or illegally. That is a question that is not within the purview of the public school system. The public school system has to educate everyone who comes in the door. We can't, if they're here legal or illegally, it doesn't matter to us. We still have to educate them. Plus the fact that just checking the birth certificate will not determine the legal of any student. So there's a lot of problems with that piece of legislation. It was a very interesting hearing. The opponents far outnumbered the proponents, but we'll have to see where that goes.
Another issue, Mike, that's really been on a very fast track in the House is a constitutional amendment to put a spending lid on the state, and that actually has moved through the House now, hasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was perfected and third read this week and is now on its way to the Senate. And actually, I was listening to the Senate yesterday and has already been read into the Senate. What this does is a constitutional amendment that proposes a spending limit on the amount of money that can be spent by any future members of the General Assembly. There is a provision in there that says education is outside this and until the formula is fully funded. Problem is, what we are doing is we're hamstringing future legislatures. What we're saying is that the legislature now knows more about spending than the legislature in the future. The proponents say that it's very hard to limit spending because people get a lot of pressure and when possible, and there's more money in the coffers than they spend. Perhaps that's true, but that's what we do. We elect people for. I'm not electing someone in 2012 to tell people in 2016 or 18 how to spend their money. It is just, in my opinion, it is a poor way to govern. We elect people to make the decisions for us. School board members are elected to run and be responsible for the taxes that come in every year. We're not going to tell school board members in wherever they are that we're going to limit the ability of people in the future on how to spend their money. And that's exactly what this proposal does. Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, what's coming up for the next week? I guess more hearings are scheduled, is that right?
The hearing schedule isn't out yet, but next week the Joint Committee on Education will be meeting on Wednesday to hear various reports from groups from outside of Jefferson City. I'm quite sure there will be a lot more hearings next week, and the Missouri House will be discussing the Accountability Portal Bill, House Bill 1140, which places a lot of information from various school districts on the accountability portal that is operated by the Office of Administration. We have some concerns about parts of the information because it's a duplication of services. That bill will be perfected, and probably we'll see what happens in the House this week. But again, they have started very early, and it's getting to be very exciting. I would hope that our members keep in contact with their elected officials and keep telling them how the actions that they do in Jefferson City affect the students in the districts in which you live.
All right, Mike Reed, thanks a lot for joining us as always on Capitol Watch, and we will continue to keep you informed on legislative issues as they progress through this session of the General Assembly, not only through this weekly video program, but also our weekly Legislative Voice electronic newsletter. And of course, be sure to check the daily blog on the MSBA website for urgent developments in the legislature as they progress through the week. Thanks a lot for joining us, and join us again next week for another edition of MSBA's Capitol Watch.